Welcome, Bronco Nation, my game review for Boise State versus Utah State. A week that had a lot riding on it. Bowl eligibility on the line, the future of the program. Where does Boise State go from here on the line after Andy Avalos fired following the New Mexico game? And you don't know where this program is headed, what their trajectory is. Well, Boise State proved that this program's future is bright, that this team is moving back towards a bright future and digging themselves out of this ditch that has been created this season. And they did that by getting to bowl eligibility and a 6-5 overall record with a 45-10 win versus Utah State. And they keep their hopes of getting to a Mountain West Championship game alive with this win. And more than that, they keep the hope of the program alive and the hope that this locker room is going to remain strong, that this coaching staff is going to remain strong, even the loss of the head coach. They keep all of that alive with this win, because this was not just a win. This was a dominant win. This was the best win of the season by Boise State. This was the most dominant defensive performance by a Boise State team, one of the most dominant defenses by a Boise State team in a long time. This was one of the best, cleanest offensive operations for Boise State this season, and overall across the board, it was a incredible effort, especially considering the scenario that was put before this brand new interim head coach. You have a locker room that you now have to rally. There's a lot of things coming out of that locker room, a lot of things being said by former players about the atmosphere, and there's a lot of negativity surrounding the team. And to be able to get this team back on track in less than a week and come in with this performance is absolutely incredible. Spencer Danielson is not my number one choice to replace Andy Avalos as head coach, but I will say that after this game, he is definitely on my list. He was not on my list when I made my video talking about who should be the next head coach at Boise State and listing all the potential candidates. He was not someone I was considering, and I've had some Twitter discussions, some Twitter debates with certain people about whether or not he should be that person to replace Andy Avalos. And while I still do not believe he should be that person right now, he's not in my top 3, I do think that he put himself out there as a candidate that should be considered. And in the long run of things, he may end up proving that he is the guy to lead this program. But he definitely made a step towards. I said this game was going to be a resume builder. This was going to be his job application this game and throughout the rest of the season to say, hey, you should take a look at me. And mission accomplished on that end, because this team was more focused. This team was more energized. This team played harder than I have seen them play at any point this season. And the performance overall doesn't just speak to a team playing motivated, also talks to a coach coming in with the right game plan, both defensively and offensively, and executing perfectly. And that's what you want out of a great head coach. And Spencer Danielson showed he has that capability in him with this performance. Again, you cannot judge a coach on a single game, and you shouldn't judge a coach on a couple of games, but he very definitely put himself in the running with this performance. And this team has shown that regardless of what ends up happening from here on out, their future is bright. This team is still strong. So let's get into it. We're going to review the offense, the defense, the special teams. We'll grade all 3 of those. Then we'll also look at how Boise State did against my keys to the game, and we'll wrap up with what this win means for the program moving forward. So starting with the offense, well, Bush Hamdan's offense today was the best offense I've seen from Boise State this entire season. And it's surprising because, again, you lost the player that probably ran that offense the best in Maddox Match with the injury. Now, it's Taylor Green's offense again, and Taylor Green had struggled running this offense before. But I think what we finally saw was Bush Hamdan's offense. Just Bush Hamdan. Completely free. I have no chains to hold or strings to hold me down. And he is running this offense fully by himself and being able to make his calls. If there was no interference from anybody else, Bush Hamdan was able to come out and run the offense he wanted to run. And it was the offense that we were promised in the preseason. It was a run-heavy offense that utilized the quarterback run game and used the running game to set up the pass. Would run in a certain direction, would show a certain formation to trick the defense into covering down on the run and then open up the pass opportunities. We saw that time and time again in this game. Even though there was only 93 yards passing, those 93 yards passing were important passing yardage, and they were opened up by the 352 rushing yards that Boise State put up in this game. 445 yards of offense. The offensive line was dominant. The play calling opened up opportunities for the offensive line, and the running game pushed the passing game to be more open. Now, if Taylor Green can continue to work on his accuracy, which is something that's plagued him for a long time, that passing stat number would have been 150 plus, maybe in the 200 plus range. He had 2 deep touchdown passes that he missed. One of them was an egregious miss. The wide receiver, similar to Prince Strong last week, running completely open behind the defense. Austin Bolt was running completely open behind the defense, and Taylor Green way overthrew him when all he had to do was just even underthrow it a little bit. He could have underthrown that ball by 5 or 10 yards. Austin Bolt could have caught it and still gone down and scored a touchdown, and he missed. And that would have been a deep, probably, I don't remember exactly where they were on the field, but 60-ish or so long touchdown. And then there was another deep 40-ish or so long touchdown that was missed. Not quite as open this time, but still open, that was missed by Taylor Green. Austin Bolt had a couple steps on the defender. So Taylor Green still struggling with his passing game, but what we saw out of Boise State was that the play calling was allowing Boise State to set up the pass much more efficiently in this one. A perfect example of that is the brilliant play call after the turnover that the defense was able to take away from Utah State to roll the whole formation to the right side, to make it look like Boise State is running to the right side, maybe going to do a quick dump-off pass to the right side like they've done previously, and then they turn back to the left and throw to a wide-open Matt Lauder on a perfect throw that scores for a touchdown. A second play, also using Matt Lauder, Boise State lines up in an I formation. Matt Lauder is the fullback. Boise State, instead of handing the ball off to George Holani, Matt Lauder then runs a flat to the right side, and Boise State Taylor Green throws an easy touchdown to him. That was a very Dan Paul-esque touchdown. If you remember a few of those touchdowns, they used to run Dan Paul out on the fullback move. A great player for Boise State, and the hammer is named after him. So that's what that reminded me of. We were finally starting to see Boise State running the ball, showing power. You know, it's not your typical traditional pass-heavy Boise State attack, well, balanced, but with a deep ball option. But it was definitely showing more of that creativity and trickeration than what Boise State has done previously this season. And we got to see Boise State's offense fully unleashed. Taylor Green's legs being used in the running game. Even when he wasn't the one actively running, Boise State was definitely emphasizing the RPO option. There was a couple of plays there. I'm thinking specifically of the play to Prince where he caught the ball. He did have a drop, but there was a pass to Prince where Boise State pulled the ball out of George Holani, looked like Taylor Green could have ran it, and there was a 3 wide receiver set up on the left side, and they threw the ball to Prince. It was a brilliant play call because they had enforced the importance of stopping the run to the defense and also enforced the fact that Taylor Green could use his legs. Now, I will say that Utah State's defense did a very good job of containing Taylor Green when he tried to run today. Only got a couple of long plays out. And Taylor Green definitely could have pulled the ball a few more times than he did when probably handing the ball off wasn't the best option. But the option was there, and Boise State was calling an offense that actually was attuned to Taylor Green's strength. This offense worked so well today because it actually put Taylor Green in situations where it was going to work to what he was good at. He didn't have any near interceptions because he wasn't being forced to put the ball into harm's way or expected to throw the ball pass heavy. He had 17 attempts, only 8 completions, and again, a couple of those were overthrows on his end, but he was being put in positions where the passes he was making were easy completions for the most part, or he wasn't having to force the ball into tough spots. The running game was what Boise State was building their strength off of, and that's what we expected to see out of Boise State this season, and that's what we finally got to see. Now, part of that was helped by the fact that Genty was back. Genty came back. He was wearing a brace on his leg. Definitely didn't look like he was 100% out there. I mean, he didn't seem like he was limited in carries. He had 12 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown and 7.1 yard average, but he definitely seemed like he was missing just a bit of that extra step or extra power that he usually would have to break through some of those plays. He still had a hurdle, but definitely seemed like he was missing a step on some of the plays. So definitely didn't seem 100%, but he was back. And that 1-2 punch of Holani and Genty, I mean, there was a drive by Boise State where they literally just ran Holani and Genty the entire time, the two of them, before Holani was able to break it deep for a long touchdown. Boise State's 1-2 punch between the two of them was incredibly effective, and again, part of that was aided by the fact that Taylor Green was also a threat in the running game. Again, across the board, the perfect offensive performance, the one we thought Boise State was going to be running all season long. Now, this was definitely helped by the fact that George Holani had a huge game, 178 yards, 11.9 yard average, and 2 touchdowns. This ties his career high rushing yards. Do you want to know the last time that he ran for 178 yards? 2019, his first season, versus Utah State. So he has 178 yards versus Utah State. The last time he did that versus Utah State. This is a career high game average for yards, 11.9 yard average per carry. His previous career high was 11.1 yard average again versus Utah State. So overall, almost an identical performance versus Utah State in 2019, 178 yards, 11.1 yard average, 2 touchdowns. This week versus Utah State in 2023, 178 yards, 11.9 yard average, and 2 touchdowns. George Holani, definitely the starter in this game. That was clear. I mean, he's the senior. He's the guy who's been playing the last few games. Genty's coming back, from an injury. But they were definitely emphasizing getting them both in the game. Genty, 12 carries. Holani, 15. Holani, definitely the primary back. But both backs being used effectively in the offense. Not the double rotation where there's a mixture of running backs and you don't know who's going to have the ball, and then they're not being allowed to build off their momentum. Much more effective usage of the running backs than the last time we saw Holani and Genty combined in a game, the game that Genty hurt himself. And again, I think it's because Bush now has the confidence that he is going to be the one that's able to make the calls with nobody on his back, nobody staring down who doesn't know what they're doing offensively. That's not their wheelhouse, stepping in and interfering with the offense. We saw the offense reach its full potential today under Bush Hamdan. And that offense, if that offense had been ran all year long the way that it was run today, I think that Boise State would have a much different record right now than what they're currently sitting at. However, Boise State, an incredible performance beginning to end. Yeah, the first three drives weren't great. 2 3-and-outs and a punt. But then Boise State got their legs under them and they started hitting. And the longer that game went on, the longer those runs got. And towards the end of the game, I mean, Jean-Marie Dubar got a chance to take some carries there in the second half, a little bit in the garbage time area, 10 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. But the touchdown that he had, I mean, I think anybody in the stands could have ran that touchdown completely wide open on the defense. The line opened up like the Red Sea, and that's how depleted the defense was at that point, that Boise State was able to just come in and run it down their throat for a touchdown to get that 45-point win. So overall, incredible performance across the board by Boise State, especially in the running game, especially in the play calling to set up both the run and the pass options for Boise State. You would like to see some more opportunities in the passing game that Taylor Green is able to exploit. Again, Austin Bolt, 0 catches. He should have had a stat line of 2 receptions for about 100+ yards and 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, not his fault. Missed by Taylor Green. Still missing in the deep ball, which has been his issue since last season. So something that Taylor Green is still expecting to work on. But look, he's not been the passing quarterback this season. He hasn't been put in those situations. He hasn't built chemistry with these receivers. He has been in a horrible 2-quarterback rotation system that didn't help him or Maddox Madsen achieve their peak efficiency. So it's not surprising that this is basically a first game of the season look for him. I mean, that's how rusty overall he is at managing an offense entirely by himself. I mean, this is basically like you're coming in off of an off season and playing for the first time as the starter again, because he hasn't had the starter job locked up since basically the first game of the season. I mean, he's been substituted in and out since then. So for Boise State, for Taylor Green, this was an opportunity to work on himself, and we saw him take a step forward. I think as he towards the end of the season, hopefully there's a few more games left after the Air Force game, I think we will see him continue to improve in this offense with Bush Hamdan as he is allowed to maintain and develop himself in that starting role for Boise State. But overall, I thought it was a great performance. Like I said, incredible performance by Holani. Matt Lauder, 2 touchdowns. Prince Strachan had his first drop of the season, but there's going to be some negatives. He also had a nice catch and run for a 31 yards. So overall for Boise State, offensively, I'm giving this a solid A performance for the offense. Could have been an A+ if they'd hit a couple of those deep touchdown passes, but incredible performance overall by the offense. Now, the story of this game, 45 points is a great stat line, but the story of this game is the defense. This was the most impressive defensive performance I've seen this season, and is one of the most impressive defensive performances I've ever seen for Boise State. Yardage-wise, pretty average, 373 yards, 209 yards passing, 164 yards rushing. And Boise State was definitely helped out by the injury bug that hit Utah State in this game. They ended up with their 3rd-string quarterback in the second half. Cooper Lagos taken out early in the game towards the end of the first quarter, towards the midway point in the second quarter, I believe. Cooper Lagos taken out. Hillstead comes in, who's played significant playing time. He ends up getting taken out in the second half. And then Levi Williams, familiar foe for Boise State Broncos, formerly from Wyoming, he ends up finishing the game for Utah State. So I will admit that Utah State was not operating at their peak efficiency for most of the game. And while Cooper Lagos was in the game, they were definitely a much more efficient team that was definitely at least holding their own with Boise State. However, the outside factors, regardless, Boise State, before the injury to Cooper Lagos, was still playing an impressive game overall. I mean, you had sacks across the board. Boise State was blitzing for one of the first times this season consistently throughout the game. Boise State has always, this whole season has been almost like they're reserving their blitz for some reason. They're waiting until the second half, or they'll do it in the first half and then draw back in the second half. It hasn't been consistent, and Boise State's not been able to get through with three-man rush. They just haven't been able to. They have some great players there on the line, but they're not quite at that, DeMarcus Lawrence level. They aren't quite at, that Tyron Crawford type level. That they can make the plays by themselves, and they're those monsters that nobody's going to be able to stop. Given the right scheme, they're able to break through. Ahmad Hassanin, when Boise State brings a fourth guy, Ahmad Hassanin is going to get to the quarterback most of the time. He's going to have an opportunity to have a chance to fluster, to pressure, or to sack that quarterback, because he is an incredible player. But you've got to scheme correctly for these guys to have that opportunity. Boise State in this game had 9 sacks. 9 sacks! And that wasn't because Utah State's offensive line just sucked. That wasn't because Utah State had backup quarterbacks in the game. That wasn't because Boise State's individual players just played better, and they did have a strong performance individually, but it was because Boise State finally schemed correctly to counter the pass. They finally brought the pressure. Boise State had 8 players with sacks, and 5 of them were linebackers or secondary players, and the defensive linemen that credited with sacks, most of those came off of blitzing by the secondary or the linebackers to allow the sack to take place. Almost every single sack, I'm pretty sure every single sack, I'd have to go back through and watch every single one, but at least almost every one, if not every single one, came off of a blitz by Boise State. The passing game, even before Cooper Lagos went out, was not running efficiently. It was better than after he went out. The 10 points, I believe, all came under him. But it was running better under him, but not efficiently. And Boise State was still putting pressure and getting to him because the scheme finally worked. And I don't know why Boise State hasn't run the scheme all season. Maybe it's Andy Avalos. I don't know. I don't know the behind the scenes. I don't know if Spencer Danielson was being handcuffed because Andy Avalos wanted to run a specific scheme. But I do know that Spencer Danielson's first game as head coach, where no one is telling him how to run his defense, nobody is over the top of him. He gets to control everything, and he was still calling this defense on the sidelines, even though Boise State elevated a defensive analyst to be the defensive coordinator. He was still the defensive coordinator for this game. I do know that with him fully in control and nobody telling him what to do, Boise State played their best game of defense. Now, were there vulnerabilities? Yes, they were still giving up deep passing plays to Cooper Lagos. There were still some opportunities. There were still some broken tackles. It wasn't a perfect, still gave up 373 yards of offense, so it wasn't perfect across the board, but they were making the stops in the red zone, and they were bringing a scheme that was forcing Utah State into deep third and long, second and long type situations, forcing them to feel like they had to hold. There was an abundance of penalties on Utah State, both false starts and holding, because they knew they could not beat this scheme. And that scheme came when Spencer Danielson was fully in charge. So I've looked at Andy Avalos as one of the faults for this offense throughout this season, and that's pretty easily identifiable. But there's a good chance that Spencer Danielson is not entirely to blame for this defensive performance this season, because what we saw today was a defense that looked like they were unhinged, unleashed, and attacking aggressively. Some incredible individual performances across the board. Alexander Tubner, he had 8 tackles. He looked amazing out there. Now, again, still lacking in the coverage area, which is something he struggled with all season. But his tackling has never been in question. And he had multiple tackles. He had 0.5. I believe he had 0.5 tackles for loss, unless I'm looking at someone else's stat here. But he played amazing throughout this game. He had 8 tackles in this matchup. He was making big stops for Boise State on 4th down. He was making big plays in the open field. He had an incredible performance. Another player coming off of an injury was Ty Bensfield. He had 7 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2.5 tackles for loss because, again, Boise State was scheming to get their secondary and linebacker players in the backfield. Braxton Freely, who coming into this game only had 7 tackles on the entire season, had 4 tackles and 2 forced fumbles in this matchup. An incredible individual performance by Braxton Freely. Simpson, he had 4 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss. Amarian McCoy, he had 3 tackles, a sack, a tackle for loss, and an interception. Rodney Robinson had a pick. And Ahmad Hassanin, who has been the tackling maniac all season long, he had 5 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2.5 tackles for loss in this game. Boise State's individual players stepped up and performed well, but it is also because they were put in a scheme that allowed them to get the maximum potential out of their individual effort. Boise State across the board, they had interceptions, they had forced fumbles, they had sacks. It was an incredible performance by this defense. They had 4th down stops in the red zone. They ended the game on a 4th down stop in the red zone. They got an interception in the red zone, inside the end zone that was ran back by Martin McCoy for 21 yards. Boise, I have not seen a defense play to this level, and this was not for a long time, and this was not a bad offense that they faced. This was not a mid-level, low-level offense in the Mountain West. Now, it has been a Utah State team that's been inconsistent. They've played great in some games and poorly in others, and this performance is going to go down as one of their poorly played ones. But this was an offense that could have challenged Boise State successfully. I mean, they have 3 incredible wide receivers. They had a great quarterback in Cooper Leos, and Hillstead has played well for them as well. I mean, he had almost 1,000 yards coming into this matchup. So it's not like Hillstead is some untested guy on the bench. I mean, this was a quarterback that had experience, that had stolen the starting job for a little while there before Lagos won it back. And Boise State was able to shut them down. Only 209 yards passing versus an offense that could definitely have exploited a secondary if given the opportunities. But they didn't have those opportunities because Boise State brought the blitz. Finally, something I've asked for all season long. They brought it consistently, and it didn't matter if the secondary was able to stop them or not because the quarterback was never being given a chance to get the ball off in the first place. Secondary just had to cover their guys for 3 seconds or so before the defense was in the backfield. Boise State finally schemed correctly to take what they had on the roster, which is an inexperienced young secondary, and brought the pressure with a motivated, energized defense, which has a lot of those type of players across the board, even if the experience level is low, to force the offense into a position where they were going to make mistakes, and they made mistakes. 2 interceptions. Boise State's had 6 all season. Coming into this game, they had 2 in this matchup. 2 forced fumbles and 2 fumble recoveries. They had 5 of those all season coming into this. And 9 sacks. They had 22 all season long. Boise State had half as many sacks as they've had all season long in this game. And that is a all-time record high since Boise State joined the FBS in 1996. That is a record-breaking in-game sack performance by Boise State in this matchup. And allowed only 10 points, which is their 2nd lowest performance all season long. So because of all those reasons, because of the scheming, because of the individual effort, and because of the stat line, specifically in the turnovers and sacks, I'm giving this an A+ performance for the defense. I believe that's the first time I've done that all season long, and it is incredibly well-deserved. So looking at special teams here real quick before we look at the keys to the game. Jonah Dalmes, 1 of 1, 44-yard long. Boise State crushed this game. They destroyed it. I thought the kicking game would have a little bit more of a role. I thought this was going to be a much closer matchup. If you remember by my score prediction, I was predicting that Boise State would win this game 41-38. Well, I pretty much got the offensive score right. What I didn't count on was this defensive performance that absolutely dominated and shut down Utah State throughout this matchup. So, Jonah Dalmes came out, did his job, 1 of 1, 44-yard long, continues to improve and increase his overall career performance stat line for Boise State. James Ferguson Reynolds, another great game by him. Utah State was trying to get in his head. They were trying to fluster him. They blocked one of his punts, but he didn't allow that to stop him. You could have seen a player who changed his style, that got into his own head, that allowed himself to snowball and go downhill, but that didn't happen. After the blocked punt, which, by the way, even though it was a blocked punt, it still went for 30 yards. When was the last time you saw a clean block? I mean, I think it hit the face mask of the defender. A clean block of the punt that still went downfield for 30 yards. I mean, it hit after like 10 or 15, but then it rolled for another 20 to get 30 yards downfield. That's how powerful this punting game is by James Ferguson Reynolds, that even when the punt is blocked, he punts for as far as I've seen other punters average. And the New Mexico punter like 5 or 6 years ago was averaging like 34 yards a punt. And James Ferguson Reynolds in a block was able to achieve that. Whereas this guy, you know, some punters will go out and leg it, and that's as far as they'll be able to get it. So 30-yard punt, even with a block, averaged 51 yards overall. He had 2 inside the 20, and the punt after the block was one of his best punts of the entire game. Another one of his beautiful down inside the 10 type range punts. So James Ferguson Reynolds, unfazed by the pressure. Another incredible performance by him. And looking at the other stats for Boise State on this one, Utah State was really aggressive in their special teams, and that played well for them, that they were able to return some good punts. They had 4 punt returns for an average of 9 yards, which is not a great stat for Boise State. You want to stop that. So they were definitely coming at it aggressively from that mindset, and they obviously went out and got that block. But maybe they were simmering just a little bit too high on that special teams unit, because Utah State had a player ejected, number 48, ejected for punching on a PAT. I mean, when's the last time you saw someone get that heated over a PAT? So maybe they need to turn the heat down just a little bit on their special teams, but they had a good special teams performance. But Boise State was able to contain them. They didn't allow any of their kicks to get blocked, their field goal kicks, and the one punt that was blocked still went for 30 yards. So overall, I'm going to give it an A- because the punt block was allowed. Boise State should have stopped that, and they did allow some longer punt returns. I mean, if you're not really protecting the punter, you should at least be stopping the punt return. I mean, if you're prioritizing getting down and stopping the punt return, then you should at least be doing that. And if you're not doing that, then you should be able to protect the punter. And neither of those two things were happening. So for Boise State, I'm going to give them A- overall, but still in the A category for special teams. All right, real quick here, 3 keys to the game. How did Boise State perform? Well, key number 1 was the season isn't over. There's still a lot to play for. There's still a lot to motivate you to go out and win. And Boise State was definitely the more motivated team in this one. So A+ performance. Lean on your leaders. Boise State clearly had that going for them. George Halani, one of the leaders on this offense, one of the seniors on this offense, had a career performance offensively. DJ Schramm stepped up. He got himself a sack. He was performing exceptionally. Alexander Tubner, etc. Across the board, Boise State's leader stepped up and performed both individually well, but you could also see that they were performing on the sideline. A focused, concentrated effort like this off of the turmoil that has happened doesn't just happen with the head coach, doesn't just happen with the leaders, the hired staff on the program. The only way a program gets this focused and motivated to come out and play is by student leadership in the locker room. And while I'm not back there in the locker room seeing what's going on, you have got to believe that that happened this week, and the evidence is in the results. So A+ performance on that, and then let Bush cook. And boy, did he. He cooked up an incredible stew in this performance, and I can't wait to see what he brings into the game versus Air Force, and potentially a bowl game now on the line as well that Boise State's going to be looking to go play. So we've got a couple more games this season at least. Potentially, if some other things happen, maybe a very big game there right before the bowl season. So for Boise State, Bush Hamdan, A+ performance, and being allowed to go out there and coach the offense the way that he knows how to do it. And it was a great job done without any of that over-the-head pressure that I think has slowed Boise State down this season. So what does this win mean for Boise State? Well, it means that they've won themselves a bowl game. They are now into the bowl season. They will be getting a bowl game. And I think that they will accept it because these players want to end this season the right way. It means that Spencer Danielson has definitely entered his hat into the ring for a potential head coach of Boise State and showed that he can do it. This team was well managed. Seeing Spencer Danielson on the sideline, the way that he was talking, the way he was managing the team, the way that he was keeping the emotions back when some of Utah State's players were trying to start things. I mean, in that PAT attempt where Boise State made it and then there was a punch, a lot of times you see both teams get fouls, personal fouls on both players, but it was clearly only Utah State. only Utah State aggressively attacking Boise State, and Boise State's players were backing off. They had the right mindset, and a lot of it has to go to Spencer Danielson coming in and having a well-coached program that is focused on going out and winning the game the right way. So he's definitely put himself into contention for that head coaching job. And then what else does this win mean? Well, it means that Boise State has shown that they are now back on an upward trajectory. Things are bright. 2024 looks bright. This program has a future, and potentially this season, they've shown that they might have a chance and they might deserve a chance to go and play for the Mountain West Championship game if some other things can happen around them. But they put themselves on the track that they need to go. So what does this win mean for the program? Well, it means that Boise State's future is bright, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!